Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I'm back with my June reading wrap up. June has been a very prolific reading month for me, both in the amount I've read and also the quality of what I read. So I'd say it's probably my best month of reading this year, which is great. So I read 10 books in the month of June and I also DNF'd 2 books. So I will talk you through them, starting from the best and then going down to the less best, just because I feel like when I start with the books I didn't like as much, I waste a lot of time and energy on them, and when I get to my favourite books, I'm a bit like, I don't have as much to say, so I really want to focus on the ones that I have loved, because this month I would say like 6 out of the 10 books, no more, maybe 7 or 8 out of the 10 books are easily like 4 stars and above. I don't really star rate my books, just because I feel like so much of it depends on the time that you read it, your mood at the time, and it's all quite subjective. And I found that when I used to star rate my books, I would get so hung up on what I was going to rate it that like I wouldn't really be reflecting on the book. I'd be like, oh, is it a 3.5 star or 4 star, where like it doesn't really matter. So for me that works better. I don't star rate my books. So yeah, probably the best book I read this month is Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid. I read this book for a vlog that went up on Sunday, where I was reading books from countries that I hadn't read before in the Americas and the Caribbean. Jamaica Kincaid is from Antigua and Barbuda, and I'd never read an author from there before. She has been on my radar for so long, and I'm so annoyed that I haven't got to her until now, because I absolutely love this book. It's such a short little book, and quite often short books don't do it for me. I find it really hard to get into them. But this I just loved. So this is about Lucy, who is an au pair who comes from the Caribbean to New York to work with a sort of very well-off family. You're inside her head the whole time, and it's basically just her reflections on the world. This book is, I found it so amusing, like being in her head. She's so disdainful of everyone and everything. So she thinks that when she goes to New York, she will be like starting over a full new life, and she'll be able to forget everything from back home. So her mum is writing her letters and she's just completely ignoring them. She's not even opening them, because she just wants a clean break. But what she finds in New York is that maybe you can't just do that. She is like 18 or 19. It definitely encapsulates that feeling that you have at that age, where you think like, oh, I'm an adult now, I can do what I want. And yeah, I just like loved some of her little, like there's so many bits that I highlighted, so many good little quotes. So at one point she's talking about what the father of the family had bought the mum for Christmas. So yeah, she writes, he bought the fir tree, bought the children the presents he wanted, bought Mariah a coat made up from the skins of a small pesky animal who lived in the ground. Just like stuff like that all the time, where I guess she's looking on at this rich family and she comes from a very different background, so she gives you quite a good insight. But she's also not fully judgmental. You start to learn a bit about her own upbringing, and maybe the reasons why she is the way she is. Yeah, I just love this and I'm so excited to read more Jamaica Kincaid. A great success. Next is a book that I borrowed from the library that I've given back to the library, and this is a book that I took out last year and didn't read because somebody else reserved it. So I was like, I'm taking it out again and I'm going to read it this time. And that's Michel the Giant, An African in Greenland by Tete-Michel Kpomassie. I might be saying that wrong, and it's translated from the French. I don't have the book in front of me, so I don't know who the translator was, but I will put it in the notes below. This is what it sort of says on the tin. It's about an African in Greenland. So Tete-Michel is from Togo, and he spends 8 years trying to save up to go to Greenland. He finds this book in a shop when he's a young boy, about Greenland, about sort of Inuit hunters, and he just becomes obsessed. He leaves his family home. He spends 8 years working throughout Europe to try and save up enough money to be able to afford to go to Greenland, and he then spends a year there. So this book is basically a travel log type thing, but it is a lot more than that as well. I love the writing style in this. I also loved, even from the very beginning, there's this excellent section at the start where he's when he's in Togo as a young boy, he is in this tree, and he looks up and there's a snake next to him, and he gets such a fright that he falls out of the tree and the snake falls on top of him, and he's like really sick. And then his family take him to this snake priest, and they sort of want him, when he's grown up, to join their snake cult. And even just that, like the way he writes about it is so amusing, but also like this was such a big deal for him. Like he was going to have to, when he became an adult, join the snake cult. And he does not want to do that, which is one of the reasons why he leaves. But this book talks so much about Inuit culture, about his time there, and it's really about people. He spends a lot of time living with different families. It seems like in the Inuit sort of culture, you're very accepting of strangers. If someone arrives and they're looking for somewhere to stay, you take them to your house, so they stay with you. There was a lot of descriptions of seal hunting and just hunting in general, dog hunting, or not dog hunting, but eating dogs. It's like a lot, so just a trigger warning if that is something that like you really will struggle to read about. Like I would avoid this book, because he's not, you know, these people are, this book is written in the 60s, so these people don't really have access to international food markets the way that I'm assuming people in Iceland would have now, so they need to eat what's there. So he's not critical of this at all, because if you're starving, you're going to eat a dog, you're going to eat whatever you can get your hands on. But it is quite hard to read about, so just a warning for that. But I just really love the way that he sort of compares his culture to the Inuit culture, but in a way, I think sometimes when European people go to other countries or to other cultures, they can be quite like, oh, it's so crazy that they think this, when clearly it's not that way. Whereas he's not like that at all. He's very much like comparing the African traditions that he's grown up with, the African conception of a soul, of ghosts, to the Inuit one, and understanding how they've both come about in a way that's not judgmental at all. So I just really loved this book. I really like travel writing. Is something that I've discovered, especially when it's somewhere that I know nothing about, and in this case 2 places that I knew basically nothing about. Like I learned a lot about Togo, and I also learned a lot about Greenland. So yeah, I would really highly recommend this one. Next is a book that I put on my summer TBR, and I got it from the library, and I'm so happy I picked this one up as well. That is Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively. This book is quite hard to describe, because it is basically, it's an old woman on her deathbed, and she's reflecting back on her life, but she says that she wants to write a history of the world, so she's trying to almost write her own history of the world from all the different events in her life. You're not getting a linear narrative here at all. You're getting like snippets of memories. You get introduced to characters from her life throughout, so you think that you know everyone, and then in the last like 50 pages there was a new character introduced who's played quite a big part in her life that you just hadn't learned about up until that point. I really like this way of writing about one character, because this is more realistic. Like most people don't really remember their lives in like a linear way. You remember the key points in your life. So this really touches on her relationship with her brother. She's not always the nicest person. She's quite narcissistic, and that really shows in the relationship with her brother. Also about a man that she met when she was in Egypt as a reporter during World War II, and then goes on to talk about her marriage and her daughter and her sort of strained relationship with her daughter. There's just a lot in this, and everything that, like, all of the memories she picked out I was really interested in. There was like one plot point that I was like, oh no, don't do this, which I won't mention, but it didn't become a big part of the book, so it didn't really bother me. But yeah, this is like such a short book. I could have read double this. Like, I was absorbed. I would have read anything about her life. I wanted more memories. I wanted like more strands of narrative. So yeah, this won the Booker Prize in 1987, I think, or 85. 1987, I think. And yeah, I really want to pick up more by Penelope Lively. I think she wrote quite a lot of books. So yeah, we'll see. The next book that I read was also a library book, which I've also had to return to the library, and that's In the Fold by Rachel Cusk. I read my first Rachel Cusk last year, and that was second place, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know why, but I thought that I wasn't going to like Rachel Cusk. I just, in my head, I was like, she's not an author for me, but like, I don't know why I thought that, because I really liked second place and I really liked In the Fold. This is one of her earlier books. I know that she's most famous for her Outline trilogy, which I've not read. I think my library also has copies of them. My library's a bit random with the books it stocks, so quite often it won't have an author's most famous works. It'll have one random like book that no one's ever heard of. So yeah, this is definitely one of her earlier books, and it's about a man who is sort of not in a very good place with the relationship he has with his wife. It really seems like she hates him, but we never fully find out why. And then he reconnects with a friend that he had while he was at university, who is very well off, and he goes to help his family with their sheep farming, their like birthing of the lambs, for a week, and it basically follows that week in his life. He takes his like very young son with him as well. And this book, I just like, the characters were so quirky in it. I loved it. It's kind of like Saltburn, like the characters, they're all very like posh and crazy without any of the like tension or like the more suspenseful parts. It's like not that at all, so don't go into expecting Saltburn, but just some of the conversations the characters were having was quite reminiscent of that. Yeah, I just like really loved the examination of wealth, of like, for example, the father of his friend from university is he like owns this massive farm, and he is very reticent to any like sort of initiatives that are going to make money but destroy the landscape or whatever. So there's a farmer next door who has sold off some of his land to allow them to build houses because it's like a really good deal and he's getting a lot of money from it. And the very rich family are like, oh, I can't believe you've done that, that's terrible. Like, they have all of these ideas in their head of what is right, but it turns out that they're not actually making any money off of their farm because they're not doing any of these things. So it's like they're like all high and mighty about it, but in reality, like they're not actually making money, so they don't really have the right to be. So I just found it all very interesting, the way it talks about class. And I was watching a video by Renee over at the Left-Handed Reader, and she was talking about how in Rachel Cusk's books the narrator never gets interrogated, and it was just after I'd finished reading this book, and she wasn't talking about it in relation to this particular book, and I was like, that is so true, because in the book the narrator is sort of, he's very involved with his friend's family. His wife's family are very rich, but you never find out much about him at all. You never find out why his wife hates him so much. So it's almost, I guess it's quite realistic that you see everything through his lens, but at no point does the sort of lens flip on him. So you're left, I guess, wondering like, well, he doesn't seem like a bad person. He seems like a very nice person. So why is his wife so hateful towards him? And if that's something that Rachel Cusk does in a lot of her books, then that's very smart, because yeah, it allows you to get someone's view on the world without ever getting the bigger picture, which I find quite interesting as a concept. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be reading more Rachel Cusk. Next, I read The Country Under My Skin by Giaconda Belli. I also read this book for the vlog where I was reading books from different countries in the Americas. She's a Nicaraguan author, and this touches on her experience of the Nicaraguan Revolution. This, I'm not going to go into much detail here because I talk about it more extensively over in this vlog. This is very much like a sort of narrative memoir. She's talking a lot about the Nicaraguan Revolution, but also about her sort of romantic life, her family life, and how that is impacted by her being involved in this sort of political situation. And I really liked the writing style and I found it really interesting, but for me, I think I was going into it expecting to learn a lot about the Nicaraguan Revolution, whereas this is very much from her perspective. There are huge periods of time where she's not even in Nicaragua, like she goes into exile for years. And so you're getting little bits of what happened, but for me, I think maybe I just wanted a more sort of overview of the events, whereas this is not that. That's not her fault. It's probably written for a Nicaraguan audience that knows the events, so like I understand, but this was maybe just not, didn't give me as like much of a deep dive as I wanted into the Nicaraguan Revolution. Next I read Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. This is a new release. I think this is the first new release that I've actually read this year, which is crazy. Like, this is the only book I've read from 2024, and I really enjoyed it. This I got as an ebook from the Libby app from my library, and I read it like in 2 train journeys pretty much. It was quite a fast read. This is about Cyrus, who he's now sober, but he's in his late 20s, but he has had struggles with alcohol in the past. His mother died in a plane, not even a crash. It was like the US shot an Iranian commercial flight out of the sky, and his mother was in that plane and died. And his father then moved to America with Cyrus, and they lived in Iran before that. And then his father had died more recently of a stroke. And so he's really reflecting on death, and especially his mum's death, and he thinks that he should try and make his death meaningful, because his mum's death is not meaningful. There were no repercussions from Iran, the US shooting that Iranian flight out of the sky, and it wouldn't have mattered if she was on the plane or not. Like, what's the difference between 290 people dying and 289 people dying? So he gets really obsessed with the ideas of martyrs, and he wants to be a martyr himself, or like he's thinking about it. He's a poet, and he wants to write a book about martyrs, and he sees in a newspaper that there is an artist who is dying of terminal cancer, and she's put on an exhibition called Death Speak in New York, where you can go and speak to her and ask her any questions you want in her last few weeks on this earth. So he's really interested in that idea. He thinks that this is a way of making your death meaningful, because you're allowing people into it. You're turning it into a cause. I really loved all of that sort of discussion, and there were bits of this where he goes into the way he talks about the way that he manages to fall asleep is by imagining conversations between a famous person and people he knows. So there's a bit where this artist who he goes to meet in New York is in a shop with Donald Trump, and they're like talking about paintings. I loved all of those little bits, those sort of like quirky elements. You get a lot of different people's perspectives in it. I really, really liked all of that. Towards the end, I sort of didn't like where it went so much. There was like one sort of, I guess, coincidence that I didn't really like in it. I didn't think that that's where it was going. So yeah, towards the end, I was less sure about it. But yeah, for the most part, I really liked this one. And then yesterday, when I was off work sick, and I read The Trees by Percival Everett, pretty much all in one sitting, which I would recommend because this is a very fast-paced book, and yeah, like I could just keep reading it. I finished it in like 5 hours or something. This is sort of outside of my wheelhouse in terms of reading. This is sort of a crime book. It was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2022, and this book is about a sort of set of murders in this town called Money in Mississippi. So it's like the deep south of the US, and there is a murder of a white person, and next to them is a dead black man's body, and he's holding the white person's testicles. So it's pretty gruesome. Then the body disappears. The black man's body, disappears, and there's another murder of a white person, and the same black body is found next to the white person, and it seems like the black person has been dead for quite a long time. And it kind of goes from there. This is like, for a crime book, this is very different from anything I've ever read, and this is very much a look at race and the legacy of racial violence in America, and I really, really enjoyed it from that point of view. The one thing I didn't like, which is just because I don't really like or read crime, is the characters in this. Like, there were quite a lot of detective characters. You didn't really get much backstory into any of them. Like, that's not the point of this book, but I just sort of struggle to invest lots of time and energy in characters that I don't know anything about. So there are 2 black police detectives that come from the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation. There's then a black female agent that comes from the FBI, and then there are local police officers. There are like a lot of characters. It's like not a long book. It's about 300 pages, and it's just like a lot. Like, I know that's not the point of it, but I think for me this is like not my perfect book, but like I really loved what I was doing. So yeah, would highly recommend this one as well. Then I read Selected Poems by Sylvia Plath. I read The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath when I was very young, like 15, 16, and I would like to reread it. I don't really read much poetry at all, but I wanted to pick this one up just because, you know, she's like one of the most famous American poets. I think a lot of her themes are quite interesting that she touches on. She committed suicide at the age of like 30, and so a lot of this book or a lot of these poems are sort of told from her sort of hospital bed type thing. She was in different mental institutions for years before her death, I think. Also looks at motherhood. I really, you know, it is a poetry collection of selected poems, so there were some poems that I really, really loved in this. There were others like less so. I think that that's normal. I'm not the best poetry reader. I struggle to really take my time and like dissect everything. So I've been trying to, when I read poetry, only read a couple of poems a day and sort of read each poem twice to really try and like take it all in. I think that this is a library book. I think it would be better to not read poems as a library, as like library copies, because I would like to be able to annotate them. Obviously can't do that. But yeah, I like would recommend Sylvia Plath's poetry. Like she's an excellent poet. It's just, you know what it's like with poetry collections. Some of the poems are great, some just don't really stick with you at all. It's kind of hard to rate. And then this is where it gets a little bit less good. I'd say that so far those are all like solid 4-star reads plus. The next is a book that I didn't like dislike, but I thought I was going to like it more, and that's Revolutionary Road by Richard Yates. This is a book that's been on my physical TBR that I'm trying to get through for this year. This book was depressing. I was not expecting this book to be so depressing. It's a book about a married couple who are sort of a little bit disillusioned with life. The man works in a very dead-end job that he's purposely picked because he wanted a job that was just going to be nice and easy so that he could not focus on it at all. And his wife, they have 2 kids. His wife is sort of a bit fed up with being a housewife, and they decide that they're going to save up and move to Paris. And they start telling everyone they're moving to Paris, and everyone's like, oh, okay. And it sort of goes from there. This, yeah, I mean, trigger warnings in this, they don't have a very good relationship. There is quite a lot of, I can't really say too much without spoiling a lot of the plot, but yeah, there are some things that happen in this that I did not see it going that way. There were some, I think this just, if you're the sort of person that like doesn't absolutely love your job, or like sometimes you wonder what you're doing with your life, I would like maybe not pick this one up, because there were points in this where he was talking about when he was at work that he would like try and get through the working day by spreading out his breaks. He was like, I would have coffee at 10 and then I'd have lunch at 1 and then blah 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 to try and make the day go faster. And I was like, oh, that's a bit close to home. Like I definitely do that. Yeah, it's just a bit depressing. It was quite a straightforward narrative. There was nothing special about the writing. Like I didn't dislike it. It just made me quite depressed. It's set in the 60s, so it's a very sort of Mad Men-esque lifestyle they're sort of living. Like he's having affairs on his lunch break, he's going out drinking with people from work. Like it's that sort of New York lifestyle in the 60s. Okay, so next is a book that I really, really, really didn't like, and that's The Bone People by Kerri. And I'm like not sure if I'm missing something in this. So this won the Booker Prize in the 80s, and it's set in New Zealand. So this is sort of about a reclusive artist, and one day this boy who doesn't speak at all turns up at her house. He's meant to be 5 or 6, I think. And then his adopted father also arrives, and the three sort of get involved in this sort of messy situation. The boy, you find out, was in a shipwreck. We don't know, nobody knows who his parents are or where he's come from. And so he's adopted by this man whose wife then dies shortly after they adopt this young boy. This book was just, I don't know. To start with, I was finding it quite compulsive. It's a very interesting writing style where it jumps from like into different heads of each character, like very seamlessly, so you don't really know. Sometimes it takes you a while to figure out who's talking. You really get each character's inner monologue, and then also a sort of more omniscient narrator type style that's telling you what's happening. This book, for one, was far too long. It's like over 500 pages, but there's a lot of abuse in this book, which is made fairly clear from, I'd say, about 50 pages in. You find out that it is in fact the adopted father that is abusing this child physically. Like, he's hitting him, and like not just hitting him, like he is beating him up to the point where like he's like covered in bruises, and that is sort of the main theme of the book, but the way that it's addressed I just found really bizarre. Like, it seemed like the author wanted you to root for this father, but he is like, yeah, he's an alcoholic, he has a lot of issues, but like he's beating up his son. Like, it was crazy. I don't know if this just hasn't aged well. Maybe I like reading into it the wrong way, but like I looked at the reviews on Goodreads. This book gets over 4 stars. All of the reviews were saying this is like my favorite book. I just found the tone bizarre. Like, it really seemed that you were meant to want this father and son to like be together. And I understand from the point of view of the son, because he's very young, and at points the relationship is very good. Like, he has shown a lot of love from his father, but then he's being abused by him. So how can you want them to stay together? And yeah, from the dad's point of view, he talks about, oh well, the son has behavioural issues. Well, yeah, because because you're beating him up. Like, it was just, for me, it was just crazy. Like, I don't really understand what was going on in this. But if you've read it, like, let me know. Did you agree, or am I just like not reading this the right way? I'm just a bit baffled by it. Then 2 books which I'll touch on very, very quickly that I DNF'd. The first is Conversation in the Cathedral by Vargas Llosa. This book was not a bad book. It was just a very long book. I read about 150 pages. I was also reading this for my reading books from the Americas. Vargas Llosa is a Peruvian author. This book is told sort of all one conversation with 2 men in a bar. They're starting to get like drunker and drunker as it goes on, and it's quite a difficult book to read because there are multiple conversations going on at the same time throughout it, pretty much. But yeah, I just wasn't like loving it, and it was just such a long book that I decided to put it down for now. I might pick it up again in the future. It was touching on a lot of Peruvian politics, but yeah, I just didn't. There are a lot of other books that I really want to get to right now, so I just put this one down. And then lastly is Independent People by Halldor Laxness. This book is not for me, I don't think. Again, it's a very long one. I read about 125 pages. I didn't like the writing style. It's about a sheep farmer who wants to be independent. He manages to save up and buy his own farm, and yeah, he's just like really obsessed with the idea of independence. He wasn't a particularly likable character, and I just didn't really like the writing style. There was a lot of description of actions, not really any in-depth character discussion. There were like a lot of characters that were just sort of coming into the book with no real introduction as to who they were. So you were getting all of these conversations between characters, and I was like, I don't know who any of these people are. So yeah, that is the last one that I DNF'd. So overall, I've had a very excellent reading month in June that I hope to continue over into July. We shall see. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please subscribe if you would like to see more.